Dear brothers and sisters, in our previous gathering we discussed a profound and powerful dua, a supplication that the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, taught us to recite in order to remove anxiety, fear, and grief from our hearts. We reflected on how short and simple the words of this supplication are, yet how deep and far-reaching their effects can be. We also spoke about some of the subtle distinctions that the Prophet, peace be upon him, pointed out when teaching this young man to seek refuge in Allah the Most High from several harmful conditions. He instructed him to seek protection from Hamm, which refers to anxiety and worry about what has not yet happened, fear about the future. And he taught him to seek protection from Huzn, which refers to grief and sorrow over what has already occurred in the past. He also told him to seek protection from ajiz, which means a state of inability when a person lacks the strength or capacity to help himself or to act for his own benefit. Then he told him to seek refuge from kasal, laziness, which means having the physical ability and the resources to do something good, but lacking the willpower or inner motivation to carry it out. Likewise, he told him to seek refuge from jubn, cowardice, and bukhla, stinginess. These two qualities involve holding back one's courage or withholding one's wealth because of fear of letting go, fear of sacrifice, or fear of losing something that one values. Whether it is the courage to speak or act, or the generosity to give from one's wealth, the person restrains himself out of fear. Then the Prophet ﷺ, peace and blessings be upon him, included two final matters in this supplication: seeking protection from the burden of crushing debt and from being overpowered or subjugated by other people. I want to pause here and say that this last part of the narration is, for many people, the most easily recognized and relatable portion of the entire hadith, yet at the same time it is often the most misunderstood. Anyone who has ever been in real debt knows the weight and anguish that come with it. Anyone who has been trapped under financial obligations understands the deep sense of misery that debt can bring into a person's life. May Allah, the Most Exalted, relieve every person who is struggling with overwhelming debts. We also understand how painful it is to feel that your well-being is dependent on another person, especially when that person may not have compassion towards you, or may even be someone you dislike or someone who belittles you. We know how humiliating it can feel when your affairs depend on someone else's mercy or someone else's decisions. So we ask Allah to make us independent of His creation and dependent only on Him. But when the Prophet, peace be upon him, sought refuge in Allah from these matters, he was not doing so because of the worldly discomforts that they cause, although those discomforts are real. Rather, the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, was teaching us to seek protection from these states because of the spiritual consequences that they can produce. Throughout this supplication, he is not focusing on worldly inconveniences, but on spiritual traits, negative characteristics that can grow inside a person because of these situations. If a person is lazy, he neglects the good deeds he needs for his hereafter. If a person is stingy, he prevents himself from giving in charity and therefore prevents himself from earning reward in the hereafter. If a person is cowardly, he fails to show courage when Allah will ask him about those moments on the Day of Judgment. The Prophet, peace be upon him, is emphasizing that all of these qualities have consequences that are directly connected to the next life. But what about debt? The Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, was someone who could have easily ensured that he never owed anyone anything. In fact, perhaps no one in the entire society of Medina was in a position like him. If he had a debt, all he needed to do was mention it, and people would rush to pay it off. Who would refuse to help the Messenger of Allah ﷺ, yet in his humility, the Prophet, peace be upon him, actually lived his life in a way that sometimes included manageable debts, and this distinction is extremely important. There is a difference between owing someone a small, manageable amount, something that can realistically be repaid, and owing someone an enormous sum that crushes a person for years without relief. The Prophet, peace be upon him, only carried debts that were small, short-term, and manageable. That was part of his wisdom. Although he lived a life marked by poverty, he never placed himself in a position where he took on overwhelming or unrealistic debt. Even near the end of his life, he had pawned his shield to a Jewish resident of Medina. He continued to conduct business and teach the community how to engage in transactions properly. But al-ghalaba, the type of debt mentioned in the supplication, refers to a debt so heavy and so overpowering that it sits above a person like a mountain. It leaves him constantly overwhelmed. But even with that, the Prophet ﷺ, peace be upon him, could have avoided debt completely if he wished. So why did he seek refuge in Allah from it so frequently? This question was even raised by Aisha, may Allah be pleased with her. She said that she was amazed at how often she heard the Prophet ﷺ, peace and blessings be upon him, seeking refuge from debt. On one hand, he never took on burdensome debt. On the other hand, he could have easily removed any financial obligation simply by speaking about it. Yet the supplication kept returning to his lips. When she expressed her amazement, the Prophet, peace be upon him, explained a profound truth. He said that when a person becomes trapped in debt, he begins to speak falsely, and when he makes promises, he starts to break those promises. Subhanallah, what an insightful teaching. The Prophet, peace be upon him, is telling us that the greatest danger of crushing debt is not the phone calls, not the creditors, and not the temporary humiliation of facing people. The greatest danger is that a person may begin to adopt the traits of hypocrisy in order to escape his situation. He may start fabricating excuses, lying to delay payments, or repeatedly breaking his commitments. Over time, he may even become good at these behaviors. These are not just harmful qualities, they are among the defining traits of hypocrisy. So the Prophet, peace be upon him, is telling us that he seeks refuge from debt primarily because of its impact on character and faith. When a person is vulnerable, they are at far greater risk of compromising their morals. For this reason, the Prophet ﷺ, peace be upon him, also taught another important supplication. He said to a man, "Shall I teach you some words, which if you say them, Allah will take care of your debts, even if they reach the size of a mountain?" And he taught him to say, "O Allah, suffice me with what you have made lawful, so that I do not resort to what you have made unlawful, and enrich me with your bounty, so that I do not depend on anyone besides you." Again, the focus is the same. O Allah, give me enough lawful means, not so I can increase my luxury, but so that I do not fall into the unlawful. And O Allah, grant me your bounty, not so that I can boast over others, but so that I do not have to rely on anyone but you. This mindset is repeated in many teachings of the Prophet ﷺ. He encouraged the companions to pledge that they would not ask people for help unnecessarily. Even if something fell from their hand while riding, they would get down and pick it up themselves rather than ask someone else. This was not pride, this was the cultivation of dignity, self-reliance, and independence, so that they would not fall into situations that compromise their faith. The mindset is clear. The strong believer is better than the weak believer. The upper hand, the giving hand, is better than the lower hand, the receiving hand. We ask Allah to place us in the position of those who give, not those who must constantly ask, so that our character and our faith remain intact. And the Prophet ﷺ taught us to make dua as a community. O Allah, do not allow us to become a source of trial for those who disbelieve. Meaning, do not allow our weakness to embolden others in arrogance or in disbelief. Strength, whether individual or communal, protects our faith. From here, the sermon moved to a striking example from the life of the companions, an example that is not flattering, but is preserved to teach us a lesson. It concerns Hatib ibn Abi Balta, one of the veterans of Badr, among the most honored of the Prophet ﷺ's companions. Before the conquest of Mecca, the Prophet, peace be upon him, informed a small group of companions about his plans. Hatib, looking at his own situation, realized that he had no family or tribal protection in Mecca if things went wrong. Everyone else had relatives there who could intercede for them, but he had no one. In a moment of vulnerability and fear, he did something extremely serious. He wrote a letter revealing the Prophet ﷺ's plan and handed it to a woman traveling to Mecca, instructing her to deliver it to the leaders of Quraysh. This was a severe act, one that could have endangered the entire Muslim community, but Allah revealed what happened to the Prophet ﷺ, who sent Ali and a few others to intercept the woman. They confronted her, retrieved the hidden letter from her hair, and brought it back. The Prophet ﷺ confronted Hatib. Umar was ready to execute him because of the gravity of the action. But Hatib explained, with deep regret, that he acted not out of disbelief or betrayal of Islam, but out of fear for himself and his family, believing that the Prophet ﷺ would still be victorious. In other words, he acted out of weakness, not malice. The Prophet, peace be upon him, accepted his explanation and reminded Umar that Allah had forgiven the people of Badr. But the lesson is clear: even someone of great virtue can make terrible mistakes when he feels vulnerable. This is exactly why the Prophet ﷺ taught us to seek refuge from situations of weakness, because Shayṭān finds his openings when people are afraid, when they feel cornered, when their worldly situation makes them desperate. The same patterns appear in our lives. When a person is financially desperate, unlawful income becomes tempting. When a person is hurt, it becomes easy to hurt others. When someone has been wronged, it becomes easier to justify wrongdoing. Entire cycles of abuse are built on this principle. Those who were harmed repeat the harm. So when we make dua, asking Allah to protect us from overwhelming debt or from being overpowered by others, the purpose is not ego, the purpose is not pride, it is protection of our faith and character. We ask Allah to keep us away from situations where we might compromise our principles. May Allah protect us from ever seeking haram as a cure for our hardship. May Allah safeguard our character, protect us in this life, and elevate us in the next. Alhamdulillah.